the average credit card interest rate right now is 23%. So if you're paying 23% on interest, but yet you have this money over here that could reset you and get rid of that interest, and you could take that cash flow that's now freed up to apply to something else, that's a great gift. What you have to do though is be smart that you don't ever end up into credit card debt ever again. All right, welcome to a Wiser Retirement Podcast. Are you curious about mistakes to avoid after receiving a large inheritance? I'm Casey Smith. Today I'm joined with financial advisor Michaela Dowdy. Each week we bring you practical advice on retirement, investing, and planning for your financial future. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. So let's get started. Hey, Michaela.
Hi, Casey.
So Michaela and I are separate today. We've got a new podcast studio that is being built out. We're excited about it at Wiser Global headquarters in Marietta, Georgia. So yeah, we're doing our remote. Well, we're not quite remote.
Remote, but kind of remote.
Remote, yeah, exactly.
Different rooms.
All right, so I thought this was an interesting topic, simply because we see it so much. I mean, everyone talks about in our industry how, there's this great wealth transfer starting between boomers and the next generation. And so we see a lot of that. We see a lot of people inheriting assets. And it's interesting to see what happens sometimes. Obviously, if you're working with a wealth management firm, I mean, you're probably not doing anything crazy or stupid with your money, right?
Definitely.
But we've seen some things over my 25 years,
Yes.
for sure. So we put together a list. We'll kind of hop through these, but basically it's a top 10 list, no particular order, of things that tend to happen when people get an inheritance. I still think that all the rules of financial planning still apply when something like this happens, meaning that, if you have credit card debt, it can be used as a great reset for a lot of people. Yes. It can also be used to take a family to the next level when it comes to wealth, and you build on that wealth and pass it to the next generation. I think that's the intention, right?
Always, yes.
But it doesn't always happen that way. So let's just start, Michaela. I'll let you you put this list together. I'll let you start here with number one.
Yes. So first is just not rushing into any larger financial or even just big decisions in general while you're still grieving. If you're receiving an inheritance, that typically is because someone has passed that is your loved one that you care about and care for. And that can be a very difficult time and definitely a very trying time on your emotions. So that's something where you don't want to make any sort of larger impulsive decisions while you're still grieving and going through the process of healing through just the loss of a loved one. So it's trying to find that balance. And sometimes that can be difficult, especially if you receive a larger sum of money and you've already had a dream in mind that I'm going to buy this sports car or something like that. And then, of course, you're having the emotions that you're grappling with. And then that's a very big dopamine surge to be able to purchase that car and then go to ride it on the road. But the problem is 6 months down the line, you're still responsible for that car. And now you've spent your inheritance. And so it's trying to find that overall balance within those decisions, and making sure that you're making still smart financial and just overall life decisions while you're grieving.
I remember a story. It was a sibling of one of our clients who inherited I wouldn't say a tremendous amount of money. It was around $800,000, I think, but they started taking private flights. So $800,000 doesn't even generate enough dividends and gains in a good year to pay for that lifestyle on a regular basis. So every time he went somewhere, he would fly private. So you're looking at losing, $10,000 to $30,000
minimum
round trip on the East Coast anyway. I don't know where he was going, but he paid for all these lavish things and eventually just took the money down to zero, which
Mhm.
was crazy. I don't know that he was grieving. I think he was just being irresponsible. But I look at this it's not really an inheritance per se, but if you think about widows, we always tell our widows or widowers is you don't make any big decisions the first year, and
Mhm.
this kind of goes along with that. You don't want to uh, move to the or sell your house and move typically within the first year. You need to kind of let the dust settle and have
Yes.
an idea of what you want to do and learn who you are as a person, as a single person,
Mhm.
and then make decisions after that. So any decisions made in that first year need to be very well calculated.
Yes, no, they definitely do. And I think that even goes into one of our other points, not directly going down the list here, but just going on spending sprees or inflating your lifestyle that you already have, having that lifestyle creep because you now have more assets that are in your account overall, and not understanding the longevity of those, I think is the biggest hindrance. Is people think getting $800,000 is going to last for decades,
Yeah,
and it could last for decades if you invest it correctly and continue to save, with that 800,000 and put it as a part of your plan instead of the only portion of your plan. But also, if you're going above and beyond your lifestyle and deciding to spend it on round trip private flights of 30,000 a pop at minimum, then it's going to go and dwindle very quickly, and it won't last near as long as you would think.
this
So
goes back to some of our old podcasts that we've done on legacy planning. You got to teach your kids about money. You got to teach them how to manage money is part of your legacy, the past to the next generation. And you have to start young, but you can have adult conversations too. You can say, "Hey, I should have been telling you these things all along," but here's some tips on how you need to handle finances, and hopefully they'll be listening, or there's opportunities for them to be listening. But think of all the weird calls we've gotten over the years that say they've received a large inheritance, and they come
Mhm.
in for a prospect meeting. You're thinking large inheritance. You're thinking probably at least a million plus, maybe in the $5 million range,
Mhm.
and it's like $10,000.
Yes.
You're sitting at a table. You're sitting at a table trying to like keep a straight face. Your large inheritance was $10,000. Not nothing about the family that left it. I mean, I'm not saying anything negative about them, but it's the person receiving it, like, has probably never seen $10,000
Mhm.
before, right? And
That's
then
the thing.
unfortunately, they almost always have lots of credit card debt that really just needs to be applied to.
No.
Um, so yeah,
Well, and it's that relativity of, how much is a lot of money to different people, and it's just
yeah,
dependent on what you've grown up in, what environment you have. Because 10,000 can be a lot to some people, or it can be, oh, 10,000, that's nothing, to other people. So it's
right,
finding that relative number for sure. And understanding that, yes, like it can easily be splurged, and it's just trying to get it invested correctly, at any dollar amount it may be, or just on the right track, even if that's not investing. If it is paying down credit card debt, whatever it may be, that would be the best option. Which is where, making sure that you are open to paying off those high interest debts, and that is one of our other points, is just making sure that a lot of times we see there's an emotional hindrance and an emotional kind of guard block of, I will not use my parents' hard earned money, or my dad's hard earned money, my mom's hard earned money to pay off my mistakes, is kind of how you put it the other day, Casey, when we were talking about this. And I think that's such a real conversation that takes place in your mind. You're like, my parents left me this for a legacy. They want this to be something that's growing my asset structure, that's going to set me up for success. And a lot of times we don't think of that being as paying off debts. Instead, we think it's, oh, I need to go and enjoy this money, whether that's a trip, or even if it's, I need to be saving this money and it needs to stay exactly in the stocks that it's in, that my great grandmother purchased. So
yeah.
it's just
You
those
got
kinds of emotional pulls. Are you curious why annuities keep coming up as a potential investment option? People are often told that annuities can effectively mitigate investment risks and help secure their financial future. However, annuities often benefit the salesperson and might not be the best choice for you as a consumer. To learn more about the various types of annuities, the negatives of owning them, and better investment alternatives, we have a free ebook on our website just for you. To download our ebook, Buyer Beware, Why Do They Keep Trying to Sell You That Annuity? Simply click the link in the episode notes or visit wiserinvestor.com/guides. Now let's get back to the episode.
You see that too. They're not willing to make changes in the investments because this is what dad had. You get a step up in basis if it's a brokerage account. That's a great time to be moving the portfolio around. The reality is they probably held the stock because the cost basis was so low, it wasn't worth paying the tax to make a transition into like ETFs or something more diversified. I'll go back to, not using money to pay off debts. A couple of things. One is there's an order of operation to planning, and it always starts with eliminating silly debt. So if the average credit card interest rate right now is 23%. So if you're paying 23% on interest, but yet you have this money over here that could reset you and get rid of that interest, and you could take that cash flow that's now freed up to apply to something else, that's a great gift. What you have to do though is be smart that you don't ever end up into credit card debt ever again. So you might need to cut up a card, or you might need to make some lifestyle changes, but that is a great opportunity for a reset. Another one's real estate. Should I pay off my house with an inheritance? It kind of goes along with paying off debts. I typically like that idea, depending on how old you are. If you're approaching retirement, that's a great opportunity for you to free up cash flow in retirement. But don't look at it as you spend it on a house. Look at it as you invested in the house, right? Even if you made some home improvements or maintained the home to keep it up to proper standards, that's not spending the money. It's not going to Vegas or to Europe with the money. It's in your house. It's part of your overall investment. So I wouldn't be afraid to do that. We kind of skipped around on our list already, so I can't really keep the numbers going. But another point was letting others exploit your inheritance or scams or pressure. And this is where hopefully you're not surrounded yourself with friends that if you receive an inheritance, everyone's trying to get money off of you. That would be horrible. I don't know anybody like that. But
no, you do not need that circle of friends.
You read about that in like the NFL, right? Or NBA, yes, or Major League Baseball, where these people come out of adversity and then they bring all the garbage with them, and they end up dead broke because everyone was just like sucking off the income, right?
No, exactly.
I'd probably say a more common example of that would be children. So they know that grandma passed away, and then you start handing money out down the other way unplanned, right? That could be another one.
Yes. Or even if it is more of a planned thing where it's just opportunities that your kids would mention to you previously that you didn't have the ability to provide that gift of monetary assets to them of, hey, mom and dad, I really want to do this study abroad program, or, hey, I really need money for this trip, or these different things that we're wanting to do with our family. And then previously you didn't have the capacity to do that, and now you do. And so that's where you're wanting to give because you now have this extra money. But it's great to know where that would fit into your plan. If you were building a financial plan, to see, okay, is it beneficial actually for me to be giving this money away, or do I really need to be making sure that my retirement's set first?
Right.
And then looking out and making sure that, okay, yes, let's gift this away, and make sure that we're being a giving heart. And of course, always have the giving heart. And that's huge. But also trying to balance that, especially with, like we're saying, with children and gifting, that can be a very difficult balance, because I feel like all parents just want to provide the best and the most opportunities to their children. So when you have that extra financial...
You mentioned study abroad. I actually like education. Assuming that our retirement's on track, uh, making sure that kids are debt free, I think is really big because it's so
Definitely.
expensive to live right now. Even helping someone out with a down payment on a home makes sense to me because it's so expensive to buy a home. Starter home, um, 25 years ago was probably $110,000, and now that same home is over a half million. Salaries haven't increased that much. I mean, a little bit, but not enough to justify a $500,000 home that you got to tear down. So it's there's ways that you can use that inheritance to promote the next generation. But education, I think, is probably one of the biggest ways,
Yes.
and experiences that help broaden their horizon on the world. I think are great ways. Even we see some people do one big trip, one big family trip with everybody's included. If you have that kind of family, that's awesome. But be able to create memories. I think those are good. Um, but I guess let's shift a little bit. Let's talk about poor investment choices. Uh, Man, it kind of goes back to one of our points of not having a plan.
Yes.
Man, I just it's so sad to see that people will decide to start their own business and they know nothing about starting a business. I I saw one person who started a business, and I don't want to go into tremendous amount of detail because I'm afraid that they might be listening. but but basically, they started a business and they went out. The first thing they did is they bought like a brand new truck
Mhm.
to start the business, and I'm like, the type of business that they were doing is very kind of a blue collar business. I was like, first of all, you don't need a brand new truck. Um, and so I just knew that we weren't going to be making good
Mhm.
decisions. And I don't know the business ever had any significant revenue. I think it was just to buy a truck.
I could see that. I could see someone getting swindled into create a business and then you can buy this truck and somehow have it as a write off in some way, shape, or
Right,
form. Yes. I could
right.
totally see that happening.
Um, you
That's
know,
a quick.
buying buying individual stocks or day trading, things of that nature. Those are typically poor investment decisions. Um,
Yes. Well, and I think it's also kind of going into not getting swindled by any sort of someone trying to exploit your inheritance and that pressure, but also making that poor investment choice, I think can kind of layer into an annuity in some ways of just making sure whatever products that are potentially getting persuaded to you in some way, shape, or form are actually in your best interest, um,
yeah.
and actually do make sense for your assets. You don't need your assets locked up necessarily for any short sort of extended period of time. You want to be able to be investing in those assets and not have to have any caps on returns, which is typically what you see in annuity contracts, where you don't get the full benefit of the market while maybe you don't have the downside risk. You're not getting the full benefit either of the growth of the market. And then you're also having to pay typically a larger premium of some sort to be in the product itself as an annuity. So that's just something that, especially if you're getting an inheritance and you're saying that you want to protect your inheritance, that's a really quick call sometimes that you can get very easily swindled by and making not the best investment choice for yourself sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of times that comes from the person who left the inheritance, left an annuity, and unfortunately, they also left an annuity sales guy that you're going to have to go through to process the annuity, and they can be pretty slick at times. It's only two people make money in annuities. Typically, it's the product company and then the advisor on the 10%
Mhm.
commissions, which is ridiculous. Another one is overlooking tax obligations and rules. So I think this falls in the category of counting your chickens before they hatch. So not fully understanding what the ramifications are. For example, if you inherit that annuity, there's a chance that it's going to be 100% taxable,
Yes.
or a good chunk of it could be taxable
Mhm.
coming out to you. There's required minimum distributions for IRAs. You have to pull the money out over 10 years. You got to pay. You got to pay income tax on that. So which year do you have the largest withdrawal, or do you make it equal over 10 years? These are all things that you need to have understand the tax obligations and what the reality is to your situation.
Definitely. And I think that's the one we balanced the most here lately is the 10-year rule. I feel like that's a very big topic of conversation when we have inheritances coming in to the plan for clients is talking about and going through, well, when is the best strategized time to start taking out it at the 10-year mark? But then it's also noting that we have quite a few clients here lately that they wanted to do equal withdrawals for each year of the 10 years, but because the market's done so well over the last couple years, they actually have more money than they started with, they originally inherited, so they're still having to deplete the account. So it's just very funny that you just have to make sure that you're keeping up with those returns as well when you're doing that across the 10-year board. But then also factoring in, of course, like you were saying, Casey, that income is, are you going to stop working in the next 10 years? Would it make sense to somehow delay those RMDs to a certain extent if, of course, the person that had it prior was not already taking RMDs? So that's where, you're just trying to make sure that you're abiding by those rules, but also making sure it's the best strategy for yourself in that 10-year rule.
Yeah, and then also if you live in certain states, there's an estate tax that you have to be careful of. Federal tax, you don't see that very often just because there's a small percentage of people that have over $22 million in inherited assets. I,
Yes.
I will say that we have clients that are over that amount because of businesses and real estate, especially. But there's a lot of planning that has to go in place for that. So hopefully, if you're in that category receiving, there's been a well thought out plan on how to handle those situations. You mentioned RMDs and the 10-year rule. Yeah, you have to think about your own. If you're over 65, um, your Medicaid or
Yeah.
Medicare. Sorry, your Medicare. So
Mm-hmm.
if you receive so much in income, it's going to make your Medicare premium increase. It's called IRMA.
Mm-hmm.
It'll adjust to be higher, as much as $500 a month, in having to pay for the same product that you were paying $175 a month for. So
Yeah,
that's another consideration as you pull out withdrawals. If you're over the age 65, you need to make sure that you've got your IRMA managed.
definitely.
Um, let's see. Another thing too is if you're in a situation where you're on Medicaid, so this typically falls under like special needs categories, and you're inheriting assets, you need to make sure before you inherit those assets that you can still maintain your government programs.
Yeah.
So you could delay an inheritance. You could ask the executor to withhold the money for a little while until you can figure it out. But
Mm.
that's an important part. I would say that the person who's leaving the money should have thought about all this. But
Yes.
if they haven't, if it was maybe it was a sudden thing, but if they haven't thought about it, that's something else that you need to be considering. Hopefully, someone in your family is considering that, because
Yes.
if you're the person on Medicaid, there's a chance that you're not even thinking about it at this point, right?
Mm-mm.
Um, Updating your own estate plan. What do you think that we need to be changing if we inherited assets? What changes?
Well, I think it's you have to be looking into what exactly your titling of assets will be, because now you have inherited new accounts. So now you need to know what their beneficiaries could be. If you've inherited those assets and you've now brought those over into your own portfolio, how are those assets going to be distributed after and upon your death? So looking into those estate plans and then also factoring in, like we're talking about, is there now a difference in taxation for any reason? If it is a much larger estate plan, are there any adjustments there that might need to come into place? Now, if you have kids, now you have a larger sum of assets than you did previously. Are you now wanting to set up those testamentary trusts for your children, where setting up milestone ages so they don't receive all of the assets outright at their age of majority. So it's just trying to make sure that um, you're protecting, of course, your next generation as well, just as the generation before you protected you and was able to hopefully provide you with a great legacy, as well as hopefully they had an estate plan in place that made that easy. Or if they didn't, then maybe you're now learning, I need to have an estate plan in place to make sure my children don't have to go through the same experience. So it's just going through those protocols of, okay, what does the accounts need to be titled? If we're making a trust, how does that need to look? If it's a special needs situation, do we need to establish a special needs trust? All of those different kind of thought processes to go ahead and try and establish those. And then I think another one that we talk about kind of frequently as well is, if you're in a blended family, inheriting assets can be a little more of a difficult topic, because then it's, if you're leaving assets to a new spouse, then what does that look like for your children? If you had children that were not with your current spouse, what does that look like? And those kinds of balancing dynamics, because if it's left to your current spouse, then there's not a guarantee that your children would have access to that money if you're wanting it for their legacy planning. Of course, there are parameters you can put in place to help protect assets in that way. But it's just trying to figure out what would be best for you and your family, and walking through all of those steps in estate planning, especially once there's more assets in the picture.
Yeah, I think it, to kind of, I guess, wrap this up a little bit, it kind of comes back to uh, seeking professional advice, and
Mhm.
also where you get that advice from. So you want to be careful that you're not going to a product person. You're not walking into a Edward Jones office with an inheritance. They're going to find all kinds of things for you to be buying. You need a well thought out plan. And if it's a large enough inheritance, how does that enhance your retirement? How does that, does it add income for you in retirement? Um, does it allow you to do other things that you didn't think were possible in retirement? Right. In some cases, does it allow you to buy real estate outright if it's
Mhm.
large enough, and do other legacy type things? So there's just a lot of options that are on the table when you receive an inheritance. I would say probably. Oh, I'll add this one caveat is, if especially if you receive money and you're younger, younger meaning under 60. Although I'm about to talk about divorce and how inheritance works, but there's also what they call it, silver divorces now. Older kids leave and the parents get divorced.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of that happening. So you maybe age doesn't matter, but if you're concerned about, hey, what happens if I were to separate from my spouse? The inheritance follows the person who inherited the money. It's not considered a marital asset. And so you want to make sure that that inheritance money is sitting in an asset that's owned by you. It's not commingled. So don't take your inheritance money and put it into the same account, joint account, as the rest of your money. You want your inheritance money to sit separate. So if you were divorced, the money's never been commingled. It's easily identifiable. Sometimes we do this with revocable living trust. We just create a new revocable living trust that's titled the inheritance trust. There's no such thing as a inheritance trust as a per se, but we just call the revocable living trust, which is a type of trust, an inheritance trust, and we can keep everything over there in that bucket. And if something were to happen to you, then that money typically does not go to the spouse. It would then flow to directly to the children. And so it keeps inheritance within the bloodline, which is normal. That's how a court system would look at it.
Yes.
Sometimes it will go. You can say, well, so my spouse can use the income from this, or something along those lines until he passes away or she passes away. But that is something that you want to be careful that you aren't commingling inheritance, unless you just have zero, thoughts of, hey, this might not work out. In that case, then maybe it doesn't matter to you. I think majority of our clients probably don't actually keep it all separate. Just that's not how they think. Been married for 40 plus years and everything's great. Or I perceive it that way. Um, so
What they allow us to see.
right, allow us to see exactly. So, yeah, but that's just something to think about, especially younger people. Things change. You don't want to lose that inheritance inside because it was commingled inside a divorce. So you want to be careful of that. But yeah, that's another reason why you seek a financial advisor, and you say, hey, I'm inheriting X amount of dollars. Can I put a plan together for myself and tell me how to best use this to maximize my situation?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's surprising answers. I feel like, I've told a couple of people recently, I said, keep it in cash. And they're like, what? I want to invest this money. It's like, no, you're going through like a life transition. Like, you're transitioning jobs. You're just now coming out of school, or you're doing some things that things could get real expensive. So we don't want the market to take that away temporarily. So let's keep it in cash. Sometimes the answer is maybe a little surprising of what we think about. But yeah, anything else you want to add, Michaela?
I feel like we've covered most of it, but yeah, I think that was a great final point to add, as far as going into and talking about the just divorces and how to best plan for those in the event that they could happen, and just making sure that your assets are set up correctly. And if you've received an inheritance, making sure that that stays on the side. I completely agree with all of that. And so I don't really have anything else to add, I don't think.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. If you're interested in learning more about Wiser Wealth Management or want to schedule a consultation, meet with one of our financial advisors, you can do so by going to wiserinvestor.com. You can click on the link in the episode notes, and you can even book with Michaela herself. I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast. This is your first podcast as a full-time financial advisor?
Maybe, actually.
Might be, yeah.
I think so.
Michaela's been promoted through being a planning associate, senior planning associate. Now she's financial advisor. She's a rock star at Wise Wealth Management. I'm worried about my job. They might replace me with Michaela.
Gosh.
We've got a couple of episodes. Episode 227, I inherited 200,000. What should I do? Episode 171, I've inherited money. Now what? These are older episodes that you can listen. This episode is 278. So, my gosh, we've done a lot of podcasts. We also have a YouTube channel, A Wiser Retirement. We have about 3 links there you can follow in the show notes to the YouTube channel and watch there. All right. Thanks, Michaela. And thank you, listeners. We enjoy doing this for you every week. We'll see you guys again next week.